So about half a year ago, I made this video where I showcased Zenless Zone Zero's character alternate poses in their UI screen, and at the end of it, I brought about a small concern that I had, well, it was small at the time, that has something to do with how these alternate poses are something that was slowly disappearing from Zenless's future character releases. But as of the first half of the 1.7 patch, all of the last 3 limited 5 stars to be released did not feature an alternate pose. Although we still have Hugo to look at, I do hope that this is something that will kind of revert back to how it usually is, especially with the early 5 stars. Especially once we get into the Yunqui Summit characters type of versions, because I do look forward to them featuring much more poses to their character screens. And I don't know if any of you kind of noticed it now that we're in version 2.3. Yeah, that situation and that concern, kinda had some merit in my opinion. Because, okay, before I go ahead and show you guys, let me just demonstrate what an alternate pose is within the character UI screen. So here we have Yanagi, and if we go to skill from base stats, she has this pose, and then skills to equipment, she has this pose, and you would assume that if we go back to skills from equipment, she would have the same this pose, but no. From equipment to skills, she will have a different pose. A very, very good pose. And I don't know, this was just a small thing that I, love about Zenless's character UI. It just made them look like they had a bit more something to the presentation. And I was kind of hoping that going down the line that this would be, at least, for limited 5-star characters, that it would be sort of the norm. However, as I mentioned before, that kind of hasn't really been the case, because all of this started from about, I think, 1.6, where it technically began with Pulchra's release, where we get to see sort of this trend where alternate poses just doesn't really become a thing. And if you first say, oh well, but Pulchra is a 4-star, probably 4 stars don't have alternate poses, yeah, no, Billy has one, so yeah. Granted, a lot of the 4 stars don't have alternate poses, but then usually limited 5 stars do have alternate poses. And the more we get to these later versions, the more I also realize that it's just missing, because after Pulchra, we have Soldier Zero and B, and this is where I first went like, okay, very noticeable, because I've been waiting for, or hoping for, a 5-star and B kind of version. And yeah, when I look at this and I saw that, okay, there's an alternate pose there, well, I was disappointed, but at the same time I was like, okay, maybe, default and B also didn't have an alternate pose, so maybe canonically she just doesn't like to do all these kind of weird poses. So maybe I was just thinking outside of the box there. But the more I went through it, after that, who is after NB was Trigger. I don't have her, so we'll just see here. She also does not have an alternate pose. Again, limited 5 stars. So I was starting to go, okay, that's I would prefer to see more of it. And then we get to Vivian, and there's a lot of things that they could have done with her, I would say, and she also doesn't have an alternate pose. So at this point, again, my concern just kind of grew. And then Hugo came around. I also don't have Hugo, so I have to go all the way back. And this is where I kind of realized, okay, I think they're just not doing this anymore. And if we kept going with the release order, we'll have to go to Pan Yin-Hu, and he also doesn't have one. But then he's a 4-star, so I just kind of thought, okay, there are more 4 stars that doesn't have an alternate pose than there are 4 stars that does have an alternate pose. And then we get to Yizhuan, and this is where, I kind of had hope, because, I get the skills, bird on the elbow pose, and then different pose, we go back to skills, now a different close-up. So this is where I kind of thought to myself, okay, maybe my concerns aren't warranted. Maybe this is a feature that they're actually still thinking about. But then, you get to Jufufu, that's not Jufufu, but yeah, we get to Jufufu, and she also does not have an alternate pose. So the pattern comes back, And then we get to Yuzuha, is over here, and she also doesn't have one. At this point, like, I remember who does not have an alternate pose, because after Evelyn, only Yuen has it, because Alice also doesn't has it. You know, back to her fencing pose. Yeah, back, same exact pose. And then we get to Seed, who I also do not have. Gotta go back here. Where's she? Seed also doesn't have an alternate pose. So I've just been, even if I'm not pulling for the character, I was just going through them hoping that, okay, maybe it'll slowly like trickle back in, because Orphe also doesn't have one. Yeah, it's back to the same tail pose as the skill. And then you go to the newer ones. This is literally the first day of 2.3. We have Commander Manato here, and cool pose, but again, 4-star does not have an alternate pose, which again makes sense. And then if we get to Lucia, actually I haven't really checked Lucia because it's literally the first day of 2.3, as I just said. But if we go check it, skills, at this point I'm more expecting that. Okay, that's a really cool book animation though, but yeah, well, she doesn't have one as well. She goes back to the same base stats to skills pose. Yeah, okay, the book is cool, but you know, this is something that's just kind of taking it out for me a bit, because one of the few things that I really loved about the Zenless UI is just that, the whole alternate pose kind of shtick, you know. Grace has it, and she's a standard character, and like, even beyond all of this, I've given this a bit more of a look before I fully recorded this video, because like, I can tell you, 10 out of the first 28 characters before Pulchra did not have an alt animation, which means that more than half of them did have alt animations. And out of the 10 that did not have alt animations, 7 of them were 4-stars, so you can kind of put it in a way where, you know, 4-stars probably don't really have this kind of treatment in the first start of Hoyo's developing. And then 2 of them were standard 5-stars, and the last one that did not have an alt animation before Pulchra was a 5-star that they gave away for free, which was Asaba. Now, in contrast to what happens after Evelyn, so above version 1.5, only 1 out of the 14 characters have an alt animation, which is Yuen. So 13 of the characters after Evelyn did not have an alt animation, and 10 of them were limited 5-stars, but the rest of the 3 being 4-stars. And yeah, I don't know, it's just something that I noticed kind of, well, I guess in the last half a year with this game, and I was just hoping that it was something that wasn't gonna keep going in terms of what they choose to do with these character UIs, because I don't know, I mean, I'm sure if they would change it, they could change it. It's presumably not that hard of a thing, or at least not that time consuming of a thing to do to make these animations. And I just love the fluidity of it all, you know, because like, say someone who has a pretty differing pose between their default base stats to skill pose to equipment to skills. Yeah, because like, I just love the transitions, you know, like say Bernice, you go from base stat to skills, this is what you get, and then from skills to equipment, this is what you get. And the turn, you know, the difference in the turn, and then how she has to go back from skills to equipment to base stats again. I love the small turns and all this stuff. Yeah, it was just a little thing that I'm kind of noticing, and I don't know, maybe, what about you guys? Hopefully you also want these things to come back every now and then, or maybe some of you didn't even notice that these things were a thing. You know, the only reason I noticed it the first time around or really paid attention to it was because of Julian, because from here she's holding a humongous whatever grenade launcher this is, and then the equipment she's holding a pistol. And when I go back to skills, my head was kind of thought, okay, she's gonna hold this gigantic grenade launcher, but no, she's holding a pistol. Yeah, so it's those kind of small thoughts that's just making me want to look at this. Even I don't even know, does she keep that thing? No, she doesn't keep the giant thing if we only go from skills to base stats again. But yeah, hopefully you get my point. But you know, it's just a little something that I wanted to put out there, and who knows, maybe, you know, Hoyo can get back to putting these alternate poses to the characters, because it kind of just didn't make sense for me. If everyone didn't have an alternate pose after Evel, then you can just chalk it up to it being like, okay, they're not doing that anymore. But Ichuen does have, so maybe it's because she was very highly awaited, maybe it's because she was introducing sheer force. I don't know, but we don't know what the prerequisites are for a character to have an alternate animation. But yeah, just a little thing that I want to show you guys. Yeah, thanks for coming by, I guess, and listening to this kind of neat rant. Yeah, well, see ya. Thank you for watching.